As you heard from Ed, my name's Aliza Thompson, and I am for a long time, I was the clinical team leader for the group in our division that regulates the renal products. Right now, I wear two hats. I'm still the team leader for that group, but also the deputy director of the Division of Cardiovascular and Renal Products. And I, like Carolyn, I thought I'd show you where we actually sit, since I know this is sort of a broad audience and an international audience. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is nearby. It's in Silver Spring, Maryland. It is quite a large campus, and as Carolyn noted, there are a number of people who work for the agency. Where I sit is the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and our group is tasked with making sure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the health of the people in the United States. The group that I'm in the Office of New Drugs, provides regulatory oversight for investigational studies during drug development, and we also make the decision about whether or not drugs can enter the market and be available to patients to use and prescribed by clinicians. The session that I'm part of is called Government Agent of Change, and I had to Google that. It wasn't necessarily a term I was so familiar with, and when I Googled Government Agent of Change, I didn't get so many hits, and then I just tried Agent of Change, and I got more hits. I think Carolyn in her talk about CDRH did an excellent job of describing how CDRH has been an agent of change. I'm really going to tell a little bit of a different story, which is more a story, I think, of how the community has come together to really change the landscape, at least of drug development for a number of kidney diseases. And then I want to focus on really just one initiative at the FDA and at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA, and that is really patient-focused drug development. So again, where I sit is on the drug side, not the device side, and have for a number of years worked within the development and regulation of drugs intended to treat kidney disease. And I would say that since coming to the agency over 10 years ago, the landscape has really dramatically changed for drug development for kidney disease. In contrast to 10 years ago, I think there is now, I think, a great sense of hope. And this hope is born from some recent successes and also a greater interest on the part of industry in developing treatments for kidney diseases, or at least some types of kidney diseases. And I think there is a sense, I feel it at least, but I think there's others in the community who feel it as well, that we're really entering a new era for drug development for kidney disease, or kidney diseases, a very exciting area, and that really the dog days are over. This period of stagnation, inactivity is over. And so just to point out to some of you, many of you have probably seen this when I refer to recent successes. What am I talking about? One of these I'm talking about was described about a month ago in this publication that came out of the New England Journal of Medicine, showing that canagliflozin, what's referred to as an SGLT2 inhibitor, actually slowed progression of kidney disease, reduced the risk of progression to kidney failure, and also improved cardiovascular outcomes in patients with diabetic kidney disease. The associated editorial for this in the New England Journal, often editorials offer some criticism. This one was very hopeful. Overall, the importance of credence, which was the name of the trial, a well-done and large clinical trial, cannot be overstated. So again, the idea that really we have really hopefully have a breakthrough here in terms of a therapy for essentially a disease that we hadn't had a discovery for, or a therapy for over 20 years ago. That was when the ACE inhibitors and ARBs were approved. So, as I noted, I think there is increasing interest in this space on the part of industry. And so why do I say that? over the years, I've tried to keep track of drug development in our renal disease programs, both the number of requests that come in for meetings to discuss potential drug development programs for kidney diseases, as well as our applications and where they are in their phases of development. And I would say that on a very positive note, industry is keeping us busy, and it's keeping us increasingly busy. I would say that there are a steady flow of meeting requests coming into the division to treat kidney diseases. We're also seeing it move beyond just a request for a meeting, but sponsors then actually coming in and submitting their applications to start first-in-human trials or to take a drug that's been developed for another indication and start testing it as a treatment for a kidney disease. I would also say that if you look at our drug development programs in the kidney space, many of them are progressing to later stages of drug development, getting past those early phase trials that are showing you proof of concept and making it to those phase 3 trials, which are the pivotal efficacy and safety trials, which ultimately support a marketing application and drug approval. I think another metric of industry interest in this space is the increasing number of meetings being organized by the community related to drug development for kidney diseases and initiatives in the space. And we just thank, again, the meeting organizers and for also including us in this discussion of global innovation, because I think finding new drugs to treat kidney diseases is certainly part of that innovation. Beyond these metrics that I see, I think there's also a shift in what the community realizes it needs to do. And so this is from the website put out by the NephCure Foundation, a foundation that has done very important work to try and advance the development of treatments for a number of kidney diseases that are associated with the nephrotic syndrome. These diseases typically affect children as well as adults. And in that group, which for a number of years was focused on really getting some of the science around the diseases understood, has now shifted. Has shifted to really try to develop an infrastructure to allow the conduct of the clinical trials that all these industry sponsors are interested in doing, because they realize that unless they can actually get the patients into all these studies, industry is going to walk away. And so here you see what they've developed, and it's still being developed even further. You can go online and find this Kidney Health Gateway. It's a gateway for patients to find out about clinical trials that they might be able to participate in. It's also serving as a registry to sort of understand these patients better as well. And as noted on their site, nephrotic syndrome patients have a great reason to feel hope, because today there are more clinical trials for nephrotic syndrome conditions than ever before. And so again, today the real challenge is actually just filling those trials. So how did we get here? It really takes a village, and I think at the center of that village, though actually it's, I guess, on the left upper hand corner of my slide is the NIH. It's Dr. Starr's group in the basic science research that they funded, as well as a number of the observational studies that they funded to enable us to have a better understanding of a lot of these diseases, how they progress, who is at greatest risk of progression, as well as biomarkers, things that we can measure in the blood, in urine, imaging that we can do to better inform our understanding of who is more likely or less likely to progress, as well as really tools that we can use in drug development to get early readouts of efficacy, et cetera. There's a number of other people who have played an important role in this space, and I can't put them all up here. Certainly those who have advocated for funding for these important NIH initiatives. A number of other patient advocacy groups have also done a lot to really move the needle in terms of addressing some of the obstacles to drug development in the kidney space. And some of these obstacles center around what endpoints we should be using to establish the efficacy of our therapies. Obviously, obviously, the outcome we all want to prevent is progression to kidney failure, and the need for dialysis and the need for a transplant. But the time course for progression in many of these diseases is very long, which means you need to find or identify earlier indicators that are reliable indicators of a treatment's effect on progression to kidney failure, so that you can really accelerate drug development. And so here I just highlight a number of these. Also want to note that we got where we are because of the important work that these groups are doing, and I think that we will get much further based on additional efforts that are underway via these groups to really establish, and I don't know if that's me, an infrastructure, so I apologize, this infrastructure to really get these trials done, and really their efforts to create what we need to create and what we've lacked for so long in the nephrology community, which is really a research culture. We often look with jealousy to the oncology space, where they've developed precision medicines, and as we heard from Dr. Starr, that's where we need to go in the renal space. But we've also, obviously been very envious of their ability to develop a number of therapies and get them out to patients and really improve the lives of their patients. And they've been so successful in part, we think, because of their ability to create this research culture. And at least to date, we haven't been successful in doing that. But I think these groups are going to make us successful in doing that. I think the other thing I want to highlight in terms of how we got here is really because of the generosity and the willingness of at least some members of our nephrology community to really come together and share the data, right? It's great, it's nice, it's wonderful to do all this discovery work, it's wonderful to do all this work to try and understand biomarkers, et cetera, but it's not going to get us anywhere unless we come together and share the data. And I think there are both some wonderful successes of this in this space, and in one of these I just want to highlight relates to a recent meeting we had with the National Kidney Foundation, Food and Drug Administration, where I am, and also the European Medicines Agency, which is the group in Europe that regulates drugs there, to try and again use the available data to let us come up with endpoints that we could use in trials that are reliable indicators of a treatment's effect on these later outcomes, and really do trials that are smaller and faster. I think there have been a lot of successes in terms of coming together and sharing the data. There are also some places where we haven't been so successful, and I think one of those is really the biomarker space for acute kidney injury. That's in many ways been a painful process to watch, and that I think for 10 years, if not longer, I'm sure much longer, there's been a lot of excitement and discussion about biomarkers for acute kidney injury that are actually detecting the injury to the kidney. But for whatever reason, it's really taken us a very long time to really get them used in clinical trials, to understand them sufficiently, and to get them used, hopefully, to benefit patients and used in the real world. So we need to work harder on that one, but we will get there. And with that, I'd like to pivot and focus on one very important initiative at the FDA and the CDER side. You heard about it, a similar initiative on the CDRH side, and that is patient-focused drug development, and really the importance of the patient voice in drug development and initiatives to incorporate. If you think about certain things or think back to history and how people viewed the world, sometimes you look back and you could say, well, how is it that they ever, neglected to realize something that was obvious? And Copernicus, taught us that the sun needs to be placed at the center of the universe. And looking back, you could say, well, how is it that we somehow miss the fact that patients should not be really at the center of drug development? I'm not sure how we ended up where we are, but somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that very important fact. But fortunately, we have woken up to this issue for a variety of reasons. just like the community is waking up to this issue. And so at FDA, we have really a team put together to really advance the science as relates to patient-focused drug development. So what do I mean when I say patient-focused drug development? What I mean, or how we've defined it, is a systematic approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. And again, this is the key. As experts in what it is like to live with their condition, patients are uniquely positioned to inform the understanding of the therapeutic context for drug development and evaluation, right? So it's obvious, but somehow we lost sight of this. So what are the overarching goals of this initiative on the drug side? One of the overarching goals is to facilitate and advance the use of systematic approaches to collecting and utilizing robust and meaningful patient and caregiver input, and to use that to inform drug development in our decision making. Another goal is to encourage the identification and use of approaches and really best practices to facilitate patient enrollment and minimize the burden of patient participation in clinical trials, understanding that you have already so many other things going in your lives as patients. Not only do you need to take care of your disease, but you also need to live your life, that is critically important. Other goals include enhancing the understanding and appropriate use of methods to capture information on patient preferences and the potential acceptability of trade-offs between treatment benefit and risk. And I think Carolyn also spoke to this issue as well. Really are needing to understand patients' tolerance for risk and some of the uncertainties as well. And finally, identifying the information that's most important to patients related to treatment benefits, risks, and burdens, and really how best to communicate that information to support their decision making. So how are we doing this? So even though we recognize that including the patient voice in drug development is critical, we also know that if you talk to one patient about their experience with the disease, you've talked to one patient. And so you really need to develop the science around getting meaningful insight into how diseases are affecting patients, patients' tolerance of risk and benefit, because again, if you've talked to one patient, you've talked to one patient. Or rather, as Carolyn pointed out, if you talk to one person with a disease, you've spoken to one person with the disease. So some of the ways that we're trying to get at this issue is by drafting and developing, very much with the input of the community, a process that was outlined similar to what Carolyn outlined, a number of guidance documents that really articulate how we should go about collecting this patient experience data and really how we should use this information. We've also, over the years, had a number of FDA-led patient-focused drug development meetings, and these were primarily held between 2000 and 2017, where we came in and we listened to the patients within specific disease areas about where there was need, what it was like for them to live with their disease. And more recently, we've been very involved in a number of externally led patient-focused drug development meetings as well. And just to highlight some of those in the recent space, we've had really some very I think very helpful, very powerful, and important meetings across a number of rare kidney diseases, C3 glomerulopathy, Alport syndrome in 2018. And this coming August, we're going to have another meeting that focuses on IgA nephropathy, another uncommon kidney disease for which therapies are urgently needed. And so with that, I just want to close and close with just these thoughts and comments. I think as you all know, and as I have increasingly appreciated over time, it really takes a village to successfully develop safe and effective treatments. And important work is going on to address areas of science where we don't have a sufficient understanding, and Rob very much highlighted that important work. I do want to point out that there have been a number of important scientific advances in understanding at least a number of the kidney diseases that our community faces. Again, want to just emphasize that there's also just been tremendous interest on the part of industry in developing treatments for these diseases, and so now our charge really is to create a culture that allows for these studies to get enrolled and completed. But finally, the most important point I want to make is, as the person who is the expert in the disease and who will ultimately use these therapies, patients need to be at the center of this. And so with that, I will end. Thank you.